Tonight's show is dedicated to the hundreds and thousands of black women, men, and girls who are missing around the black world. Tonight, we want to amplify their names and their stories that are often forgotten or excluded from mainstream media and law enforcement. At the Griot, we are going to take up space for those missing victims, families who are grieving and hoping, and for the people in the community who are helping keep those stories alive. Nearly 40% of missing persons cases in the United States in 2021 were black and brown people. The National Crime Information Center reported more than 521,000 people missing in 2021. That means more than 200,000 of those people were people of color. Take a look at these faces. You should have seen them plastered around the media. Unfortunately, they often don't make it off their block because of the lack of coverage or a lack of concern from law enforcement. The Black and Missing Foundation says the reason is that a lot of minority children are initially classified as runaways, and they say missing juveniles are often thought to have an association with crime. Right now, I want to introduce two women who aren't hearing that story. They spend their lives connecting the community to victims. They spend their lives pushing for justice. I want to introduce to you Amara Kofer. She is the creator, host, and executive producer of Black Girl Gone, a true crime podcast. We also have with us Nikki Irene. She's the co-host of the podcast Black Girl Missing. It's dedicated to telling the stories of black girls under 18 who have gone missing in the United States. I want to thank you both for your work and for your time tonight. I'm going to start with you Amara, because this is such an interesting and compelling conversation to me. It seems like white girls go missing, black girls just gone. We don't worry about them anymore.
Yeah.
Why?
Yeah, that's exactly how the narrative has been for very long. It's that when young white women go missing, that there's this media frenzy, there's all of this attention to them. We get to find out details about their lives and who they were and, things that makes the public connect to them. But when a black girl or a young black woman goes missing, they never get that same attention. If their story is mentioned, it's a blurb. We never get that deep dive. Their families don't get that attention. And the excuse has always been that, the media acts like, well, people are not interested in these stories and perhaps they're not elevating them. But I found in my work that I don't believe that that's true. I believe that people do care about these stories. They're just not being pushed in the same way. So
that's an interesting point, Amara, that you make. This idea that there is an appetite for missing black girl stories because, having worked network news for a long time and cable news as well, I've seen networks dump a lot of money into a missing white girl. I mean, I still see stories about JonBenet Ramsey 27 years later. So I can't understand how a story like that can happen, but a girl like LaToya Figueroa here in Philadelphia who was missing in 2004, the moment her story came out, we didn't hear about her, but we heard about Natalie Holloway. There's a way that they justify it by saying, well, white girls are more compelling stories. Missing white women are who the white audience wants to see. And that kind of makes sense to me. It's awful. I don't agree with it. But I mean, at least I can understand that logic. But you're saying if the audience got more access to black girl stories, they'd care?
That's what I believe, and I obviously can't speak for everyone. I believe that there are people who genuinely just do not care, regardless of what these women's lives were or who their, what their stories were. There's always going to be that. But I do believe that just in my experience and the almost 2 years that I've been doing this show, is that a lot of feedback I get is from white women in the Midwest, or even there's white men that tune into the show and they genuinely say, well, I just didn't know, I wasn't aware. And it's like, well, part of it is like, well, maybe you weren't seeking this information out. But even as somebody who spends a lot of time researching and looking for cases, a lot of this information just doesn't exist. It's hard to find out all of these things about these women. Like you said, the JonBenet Ramsey story, I can find out everything about JonBenet Ramsey, about her parents, about her brother. I can find all of that information readily available on the internet. But a young woman like LaToya Figueroa I'm from Philadelphia too, from my city, didn't get that same attention. And, and that's why I included her episode on my show, even though it's been years and her case has been solved, it's still an important story, and it highlights that
Absolutely.
disparity in the coverage.
Absolutely. Nikki, the idea of black girls being classified as runaways as soon as they go missing, the younger ones, and some of these teenagers are often thought to be associated with crime when they're missing. Why is that significant? What does that mean?
It means that the adultification of black girls and the criminalization that happens to us, no matter how old we are, from little girls in Florida, Relia Wilson, she was 3 years old. No one knew she was missing for almost a year in the foster care system. There's,
Wow.
Shamika Cozy from St. Louis, 16 years old, just vanished into thin air. And they were like, oh, she's a runaway. It's fine. It's no big deal. And when they brand us as runaways, there are no resources allocated to helping our families find us. And so white people have a privilege of having those resources. They have money, they've got the influence, the access. They are more respected in their communities as just being a white family, where if you have a black mother, a black father who's looking for his child, where are they going to get the money and the time to say, I'm not coming into work, I need to find my kid. I cannot come to this function because I have to go get posters made to find my kid. They don't have these resources and this access. And if you're poor, then it doesn't matter. And we don't need to come find you.
Right. We don't need to come find you. And the idea that you ran away versus you were taken, you were stolen, you were trafficked, also allows us to engage in a certain kind of victim blaming, right? Because if I say, this little black girl ran away, now what the world hears is she brought this on herself. She's missing because she want to be. And that goes back to your point about adultification, right? She's making grown people decisions to leave house. And then there's the question of parental responsibility. If she's a runaway, I feel like sometimes we look at the parents like, well, you need to control your kids more, as opposed to someone came and snatched my young white child up and then we got to go find the villain. It's almost as if we make the parents and the children the villains.
What makes it sad to look at is when you see these families who may not be nuclear, they may not be fitting the Eurocentric definition of a good family, it's something's always going wrong. There have been parents who have been just completely vilified when their children go missing. Instead of the police helping them find their child, they start investigating the parent. They start arresting them for silly things like food stamp fraud, instead of saying, well, let's find your missing kid and then we'll handle the rest of this later.
Wait a minute. You got to say that again for me. Somebody's child is missing. And they talking about food stamp. Help me understand how that can even be justified.
This happened in Mississippi several years ago. A little girl, 3 or 4 years old, goes missing from her front yard. Her dad comes out, she's gone. Mom had already went to the store, so when mom comes back, she finds out the little girl's missing. And mom gets arrested and locked up for food stamp fraud. And the little girl just is nowhere to be found. There's no investigation. They marked her as a runaway. Toddlers do not run away. That's not something that happens. And it's just how they treat our stories. Nope.
I mean, a toddler might literally run away, but like for what?
Right.
For why, and the point is, regardless of why they left, they're endangered. And to prioritize locking up this mama for allegedly engaging in food stamp fraud rather than worrying about this missing child, to me, it just says so much about how we think about, black women and girls. And I got to ask you, Amara, what can we do about that?
I mean, it's hard to say. I mean, I think that doing what we have done is creating these spaces and these platforms to tell these stories and bring attention to them. It seems to be at this point the only thing that we can do. I mean, obviously there are organizations out here like the Black and Missing Foundation. There are people out here that are actively trying to fill the space that maybe law enforcement is not, filling. And so there's work being done. But in terms of bringing that attention, yeah, I think that creators like us and bring, creating these podcasts, creating, getting into that space of true crime, because that is what people are.
Absolutely.
That's what's unfortunately
Y'all
popular,
are
right?
doing important
People
work. Like you said, I mean to cut you off there, but we got to run. But we're going to demand more from the media. We as media are going to tell better stories, but creating our own narratives, not expecting them to save our kids, but saving our own kids. That's all important. I want to thank you, Amari and Nikki, for doing the work that needs to be done. Amari and Nikki doing the Lord's work. Everybody stay here. Still ahead on the griot as we highlight missing black women and girls. We don't want to forget about black men who are also missing. A dad searching for his son is going to join us. But first, missing in black isn't something that's unique to the United States. It's felt all across the diaspora. More on that after this quick break. You're watching The Griot with Marc Lamont Hill. Welcome back to The Griot and our special show dedicated to missing black and brown people. The epidemic of missing people of color is not just an American issue, though. We can't forget the Chibok schoolgirls who were abducted by Boko Haram in 2014. 275 girls were taken from the government girls' secondary school in northeastern Nigeria. More than 100 of them are still missing, and it's been 9 years. A new exhibit in Lagos is on display in their honor. The UK is also seeing high incidence of black people who are just disappearing. The website missingblackpeople.com says the cost of searching for a person who is missing is astronomical, and it has been the subject of intense debate. Dominic Norton, he is the founder of missingblackpeople.com, which has a focus on finding missing black people around the globe, and he joins me now all the way from London. Dominic, so good to see you. Talk to me about this amazing work that you're doing.
Yeah, so Missing Black People started in about April 2021 following the disappearance of Richard Okorege. And that case is one of many, many cases where the police, the media, and basically public services failed not just Richard and not just other young men and women, but black people in the UK.
Now, when you say they failed them, say more about what that failure looks like to you.
So in Richard's specific case, one of the things that they did wrong was the risk associated to his case. So at least in the UK, for every there's a body that determines the frameworks for policing and how they associate risk when it comes to missing people, just missing people generally. And the risk associated to the case, it was deemed a low risk. Not only that, he didn't have medication, and that wasn't documented. So the right resources wasn't allocated. When his mother reported, she reported discrimination at the point of reporting from the police and wasn't taken seriously by the police. And this is just one of many cases.
To what extent does race play a role in this thing? When you say they're not taken seriously, that medication isn't documented, all these things which seem to be protocol, how much of this is just sloppy police work and how much of it is, in your mind, about race?
You asked a very good question, because it is a little bit of both. When you look across the cases, there's another case with Bieber Henry and Nicole Smallman. And with Bieber Henry and Nicole Smallman, they went to a party. They didn't return. They was reported missing by family and friends. And the police didn't act. And in the case where they didn't act, the family came down from further outside the UK. And they actually found their bodies in a park. And the police involved in that case were actually imprisoned because they took pictures of the bodies and were sharing it on WhatsApp. So you have, similar to the US, really similar to all across the world, you have very corrupt officers and you have a system that is clearly broken, especially when it comes to black people, but you have huge discrimination in institutions. Typically, we talk about the police, we focus on the police. Previously, what was mentioned was about media and coverage. In the UK, we're about 3% of the population here. When it comes to journalists, 0.2 journalists are black. So you can imagine those stories are not even getting out. Or if a journalist covers it, it's hard to even get the producer or editor to clear it for the story to get out.
Right, and that's what people sometimes don't appreciate about media. It's not just who's in front of the camera, which is important, but also who the deciders are behind the camera that shape this. Another piece that comes up on your website is this ongoing debate about the cost of searching for missing people. How does that affect the case?
So actually, right now, there's a case going on right now. It's outside of London. It's not a missing black people case, but what has actually happened in that particular case is they have brought in private contractors who are volunteering their work, and these private contractors are exposing mishaps in the handling from the police. And often, what you're actually seeing is a lot of private contractors coming in and to fulfill the work that the police cannot do. And some of it is because of caseload. Some of it is because of expertise.
So caseload, expertise, all these things. I guess what I wonder is if these people were more valued, these missing people, would we find resources? Would we find money? Would people say, you know what, you just got to double your caseload? Would you, it just seems like money is an index of something, but we have debates about money all the time, and depending on who we're talking about or what we're talking about, we find it or we justify the expense of it.
At least what I see, especially here in the UK, is that black people get hit the hardest, but black people we're not the only demographic to get hit. So when you look at missing black people and the institutions involved, the education system is involved, the healthcare system is involved. Actually, the leading reason of missing adults is mental health. And black people are overrepresented in mental health statistics in terms of the disparities. And these are multiple institutions that we're impacted by that contribute to missing black people.
Another piece of this that I've been finding so interesting is technology. I see missing people on social media. I'll look on my Instagram stories and I'll see people saying, have you seen this person? This person's missing. Facebook, I see big posts. What role is technology, new media, whatever you want to call it, what role is all this stuff playing in helping find people?
There's actually two components to that. You need community organizations like mine to work in ways that the police cannot. So, for example, when we're on missing person demand response units, and we do work with the police and we do work with charities to try and fight these institutional discrimination. And there's things that they are more cautious at doing. They're more cautious at putting out the public appeals because of how it looks, or they have more considerations than the community and community organizations. And often this comes into play. And what we do, we specialize in reaching out to our network. So local radio stations, local newspapers, community clubs, people that actually understand the community, because often the police that are involved with the case do not understand the intricacies of communities.
Right. Which seems incredibly important, and particularly when there's huge cultural gaps between the people doing the looking and the people who are missing, or the people who are reporting someone missing. And so understanding how they see the world, understanding what choices they might be making, understanding where the kids or the adults might be, understanding how they might have ended up in a particular space, shapes how you do an investigation. I think that's true for any kind of investigation, whether it's an act of violence, whether it's someone missing, whether it's drugs, whatever. It just seems like we don't always do that with folk of color. So I'm glad to see you all helping push that ball up the field as well. We got to run, but how much success have you seen so far with your efforts?
We've seen a lot of success both on the front of working with institutions to try and combat that. I think similar to the US, sometimes it can be like banging your head against the wall when working with the police or working with the government. We did a petition. We had 21,000 signatures for the government to do an inquiry into why black people are overrepresented. In short, they said no, but that's where
they said no to the inquiry. Not even where they just said no. I mean, I wish I could say I was surprised, but at least one thing I realized is that the government response to black issues is the same around the globe. Anyway, thank you for the work that you're doing. Your website, everybody needs to check out. Everybody, it's missingblackpeople.com. Stay here because ahead on the griot, we will spotlight the cases of more black and missing people. It took more than 20 years for an arrest to be made in the kidnapping of a family matriarch. But there are still missing pieces keeping a family from getting closure. More on that ahead. Welcome back to The Griot. If you've just joined us, we are spending the hour talking about missing black men, black women, and black children. We want to make sure to highlight some of the cases. Have you seen 16-year-old Jessica Agbinu Abba, last seen on June 4th, 2020, on the 8200 block of North Lake Court in Laurel, Maryland? She was wearing a tan shirt, blue jeans, and open-toe sandals. She is 5 feet 2 inches tall. She weighs 120 pounds and has shoulder-length brown hair and brown eyes. What about 32-year-old Robin Austin? Robin is a Marine veteran, last seen on August 11, 2022, at the San Diego Veterans Center, located at 2790 Truxton Road. She was last seen wearing a black beanie, silver glasses, and black bandana around her neck. She had on a black tracksuit, and she also had on black running shoes with silver designs. She has several tattoos on her body, a tiger tattoo across her entire collarbone, a venom tattoo on her right shoulder, and the words Jimmy tattooed on the top of her left shoulder. She is 5'6", 135 pounds, with medium-length brown hair and brown eyes. If your loved one is missing, the first step is to contact the police to get it on record. You can find more resources on blackandmissinginc.com/resources. Make sure you check that site out. He just went to work and was never seen or heard from again. Still ahead on The Griot, we'll speak to a father who says he may be running out of time in the search for his son. Welcome back to The Griot and our special show raising awareness about missing black people. Often when you hear about black and missing people, the victim is a woman or a girl. But black men, we go missing too. Daniel Robinson was last seen in June of 2021, leaving his work site in Buckeye, Arizona, where he worked as a geologist. A month later, his vehicle was found crashed in the desert just over 2 miles from the work site. But there's been no sign of Daniel ever since. Daniel's father, David, joins me now. Mr. Robinson, thank you for joining me on the show. And first, just let me say, our hearts go out to you and your family. What is the latest on the search for your beloved son?
Thank you, Mr. Hill, for having me on. Yes, my efforts are still going on. It's been over a year. It's going on 2 years since my son Daniel went missing. Since then, starting out in Arizona, of course, I had little to no help from law enforcement. Do all the right things, starting off by just reporting my son missing. The second method was to engage with law enforcement. I was in South Carolina, over 2,000 miles away, to engage with law enforcement to help them go out and just search for my son. I'm unable to get them to do that. I decided to drive all the way to Arizona, do it myself. And I've been doing over 45 weeks of searches, cover over 35,000 acres of land without the help of law enforcement. The grassroots search that I created. Yes.
I'm baffled by this. You know, you say without the help of law enforcement. You call the police and you say, my son is missing. I need help. Can you help me find him? I understand they said no, but how did they say no? Like, what was that exchange like?
Well, the problem was I talked to the first initial officer when I put the report in. He seemed like he was helpful, riding up down the road to see if he was stuck on the side of the road. I later found out my son actually was missing in the desert. I asked the law enforcement to go out there and use a helicopter. His first time out there in the Sonoran Desert. Of course, he's born with one hand. Just a lot of issues there. They decided not to that night. They said helicopters can't fly at night. They'll do it in the morning. The morning came. They said they was going to go out, but then they can't call me an hour later, said they're higher ups. Said that the flight was canceled, is unauthorized because Daniel's a grown man. If he want to disappear on his own, he can. There's an assumption that they had that my son didn't ever tell them that he wanted to disappear on their own. Being in South Carolina, I knew right then that they wasn't going to go look. They said they wouldn't go out there to search for him. So I grabbed everything I can. I kind of lost my mind. Grabbed everything I can just without thinking, jumped in my vehicle, started heading west. You'll do it myself.
Of course. I mean, a whole lot of us would do that as parents. It's just so bizarre to me. When you think about why they said no, I know they gave you a reason, right? They said he's grown. If he wants to disappear, he can. Do you buy that reason? And if not, what do you think their real reason for not wanting to go out was?
It's empathy. No, I don't buy that reason. Empathy, they didn't really care about it. They didn't see the serious nature of what my family and I know of Daniel. I've been there in his life since the time he was born. My family, his mother, of course, we all had worries. His sister was already in Arizona. We know Daniel's pattern, but they didn't see it that way. They just, like I said, my opinion was apathy. I just don't care. I don't want to burn the resources. But, of course, later on I even started my own investigation. Later on my own investigation, I realized a lot of other reasons why they may not have wanted to help out as well.
When you started your investigation, many of us would have expected that law enforcement would say, okay, well, he's doing the work. He's clearly on to something. You're sharing your information or attempting to share your information with law enforcement. Did they ever give any indication that they were willing to bend on this or were willing to help more? Or did they ever offer more support than they were initially?
In fact, it's Buckeye, Arizona. It's the law enforcement department that was taking charge of my son's case. They have done nothing at all. They were trying to take some credit for all the investigation I've done. I hired a PI as well. But, they show no interest. Instead of them actually taking the physical evidence that we provided for them and everything, they rejected it. They hired their own investigator to rebut things that my investigator found. And, from there, it's been a constant battle.
They hired an investigator to rebut. I mean, so they weren't willing to spend time, energy, or resources helping you find your son, but they're willing to spend time, energy, and resources helping you or challenging your findings as you look for your son.
That's right. And it was very hurtful. I've been time and time again reaching out to the Buckeye Police Department to bring the resources. I had to go to GoFundMe just to fund my searches. I was looking for specialized drones. I had to become an expert. I had to hire a company to go into the wells to check the wells. I've been trying to go into vertical mines out there in the desert, for instance. And yes, the hurtful part was that without that assistance, without those resources, putting a dime into the searches, they decided to put thousands. Cause I know how much I pay my investigator. They put thousands into PI just to try to rebut his story. And I want to add, the PI that they hired have never seen my son's vehicle, never physically touched his vehicle, never even asked me for those items that the Buckeye Police Department turned to me, but yet made a full report about something he had never physically seen for himself.
Well, you mentioned his vehicle. Daniel's Jeep was found in a ravine near where he was last seen. CNN has reported that his wallet, his cell phone, some other personal items were inside, and that police say that because they don't suspect foul play, I think that's part of why they're saying there's nothing else they can do. What do they think happened? What do you think happened?
Well, the reason why I hired my private investigator, when that vehicle showed up on July the 19th, almost a month after my son went missing on the 23rd of June, the Buckeye Police Department initially told me they believed that they only showed me two things. They had three things in their hand in the parking lot. They said, this is two maps here is where your son's vehicle was found out in the desert, Sonoran Desert. Is almost 3 miles away from the place where he was missing, the well site, and they believe that the vehicle rolled and everything into this ravine. They believe that he suffered. He didn't suffer any injuries. They told me at first because they believe he had a seatbelt on because of the way the seatbelt locks. But at the same time, they say he had a brain injury, caused him to kick out the sunroof, get outside of the vehicle. Because of the brain injury, shred his clothes off, and that's the reason why the clothes is in a pile. From his underwear down to his socks, but then he walked off into, I guess, the desert and hid under a tree where some wild animal got him. But then their second theory was that maybe he just joined a monastery to become a monk to be away from his family. So those are the only theories I got from the Buckeye Police Department.
As you go searching for your son, and I hear you say, you have drones, you're looking in wells, you're looking in ravines, that means you're prepared or considering the possibility that your son may not be alive. How do you deal with that possibility as you go looking for your son?
Well, of course, when I first got to Arizona, when I first started my searches, we was out there almost all day. It was a rescue mission. The vehicle hadn't shown up yet. Was out there trying to rescue him. I did my homework. I found out about those vertical mines that's out there. I found out about those ravines and things. So I was covering that desert really strongly with volunteers by my side. But, of course, after a month's time or so, in 118-degree weather, dead in the summer heat out there in the summer, and with nothing on his body, I couldn't imagine a person, being a military guy like myself, know certain things you won't be able to survive. So that mission from rescue became, a recovery mission.
Yeah. Sir, I can't imagine what you're going through. I can't imagine what your family's going through. I can't imagine the pain that you're feeling as you go on this search for your son. All I can tell you is that my prayers are with you. My spirit is with you. I encourage everybody to go to the GoFundMe. I'm going to go myself to make sure that you get all the resources you need to help find your son. And I'm praying for the best outcome possible, sir. You have my sympathy and you have my deepest admiration. Thank you for joining me and sharing your son's story.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much for having me on.
Absolutely. Everybody stay here. Still ahead on The Griot. She lost her mother and sister in one brutal act of violence. Why she says she still doesn't have closure. We'll talk about it right after this. Welcome back to The Griot and our special hour dedicated to Black and missing people. It took more than 20 years for police to solve the murder of Myrtle Hudson and one of her teenage daughters. The family came home to find the mom missing and the daughter dead in another part of the home. In 2008, DNA linked police to serial killer Tommy Lee Stewart. But to this day, Mrs. Hudson's remains have not been found. Joining me now is one of the daughters of Mrs. Hudson, Aisha Von Gretchen Miller. First, Aisha, I just want to extend my condolences to you. I can't imagine, again, how much you've gone through and what this must be like to experience. Talk to me about why it took so long in the first place to solve the murder of your mother and your sister.
First of all, thank you so much again for having me, Mark, on your show today. One of the reasons I believe that it took so long is because there was lack of interest due to it being considered a domestic issue. Anytime a family member goes missing within the home, they want to link a partner or a romantic partner to the crime. But police involvement was very low at that time, or interest. So we had to keep crying out, keep crying out, keep crying out. And eventually they paid attention to us because the assailant was already in prison for having committed the same crime to someone else just 2 months later.
Wow.
So
the
unfortunately,
lack of interest. How do you make sense of that lack of interest? I mean, police, their job is to investigate this stuff. I don't want to reduce this to race, and I don't want to reduce it to just, it's a domestic thing, because I feel like there are people in domestic circumstances that do get investigated. What were the factors you think that played into the lack of interest, in addition to it being a domestic matter?
Socioeconomic as well. We can boil it down to race issue or where we lived or what have you. But we weren't affluent. Our family was not affluent. There wasn't a lot of interest, just paid attention to people who lived in my community or who lived within my area. And even though these crimes continue to be committed within South Texas, where I lived, in the hometown where I lived, we don't know. I cannot attribute it to one specific thing, unfortunately, but just back in the 80s, it doesn't seem that DNA was that prevalent at that time, so they didn't know what to do. They didn't know how to link crimes. And again, like I said, it wasn't until 2000s that the crime was even brought to anybody's attention because of DNA. And that was just why it was. And I cannot tell you specifically why they didn't want to pay attention to it, but I think perhaps it was just...
No, but you've raised the right issues. I mean, oftentimes in neighborhoods we're from, whether it's race, whether it's class, whatever it is, they just don't have the same interest in us. And that's why we're trying to help, push this thing forward. Your sister's body was found in the house.
Yes.
Your mother's body to this day still has not been found?
No, she has not been found. We don't know the assailant, Tommy Lee Stewart. He told the police where he left her body, but that's 20 plus years later. And so there was no way to find any of the remains. And she was left on an island down in Port Arthur, Texas. And so they just never were able to find any of her remains at all. And I don't even know if they even went to go look, to be honest with you.
For some people, it might be hard to understand what closure looks like in this circumstance.
Yeah.
And if finding those remains are part of the closure. Not knowing where your mother is, does that make it hard for you to get any kind of closure in this matter?
Absolutely. I've spent most of my years since I was 9 years old. Now, I'm, 46 years old now, but I've spent many years trying to find that closure. And right now I have a platform where I use to help people to understand that there's damage within our childhood. Childhood trauma and issues relate to how we perform as adults. And to bring closure to a matter of this magnitude is almost impossible, especially when there is no body. There is no way to have a funeral. There is no way to have a memorial service. There is no way to put my mother's body to rest. And so our family does continue to seek closure. But, through counseling and therapy, we've been able to get closer to it on our own.
Wow. I mean, I can't imagine at 9 years old having to think about this stuff in the way that you did. You use your platform, as you talked about, to help bring awareness, to help other people heal, to help other people make sense of their circumstances. What's that been like? And how, I understand how that can be healing in a way, but I could also understand how that could be triggering in a way for you.
Yes, to some degree. What I found is that talking about it more and helping to put it on the table helps other people to unfold and feel more comfortable about talking about their childhood trauma and how it does affect your adult behavior. And that is what my platform does, how childhood trauma affects adult behavior, and the importance of therapy and counseling within our community, because that is something that we have shunned away from over the years. It's just like sweep it up under the rug and as if it never happened. And I was fortunate and somewhat unfortunate enough to be able to come in contact with a young lady who was a victim of Tommy Lee Stewart, who led us to get resolved my mother's case. And helping her to talk through what happened to her helped to bring healing to her life. And so that is what I use my platform to do, is to help other people to find healing and wholeness. And it can be triggering, but I've needed to do it. It's been necessary.
Wow. It seems like you have found a tremendous purpose. If not full closure, you've at least found purpose and meaning in all of this absurdity.
Yes.
Do you have a message for other families who are in a similar situation, who are trying to get the word out, trying to get the message out about their missing loved ones?
Keep talking. Don't stop talking. Use platforms. Anybody who will listen to you, anybody who will pay attention, use the media outlets. Go to people like Erica, who runs Our Black Girls, and all the platforms that want to talk about what's happening within your family. Don't stop talking. Don't stop talking. Keep telling your story. And somebody will eventually listen if you just keep talking, because it's hard. It's hard to be able to get over it and put one foot in front of the other, but you have to every day. You have to, in order to make it, you have to continue to press forward.
Well, your commitment to pressing forward is an inspiration to all of us. I'm so grateful for your time. I'm so grateful for the work that you do. Using your pain and transforming it into power is something that's remarkable. Aisha, thank you so much for joining me on The Griot.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Still ahead on The Griot, more faces and names of people missing that you may not know about, and how families can connect to resources. Stay right here. Welcome back to The Griot. We want to continue highlighting some missing cases. Have you seen 17-year-old Kendi Fabiola Akal Maxime? She is 5 feet tall, 110 pounds. She has long black hair and brown eyes. She was last seen leaving her home to catch the school bus in Burke, Virginia. She was wearing black pants, a black or blue shirt, and a light pink jacket with boots. She has a mole on the left side of her mouth and one on her left eyebrow. How about 7-year-old Kai Kumalo Baines? He is 3'4" and 40 pounds. He has black hair and brown eyes. Kai was dropped off along with his sister Anaya to spend the weekend with their mother, Ashley Davis. It is believed that Davis fled to North Carolina with both kids. She has disconnected all lines of communications. Kai was last seen wearing pajamas, and he has a scar on his forehead. And what about 31-year-old Crystal Chanel Anderson? She was last seen at her residence in Wagner, South Carolina on August 20th, 2022. She's 5'1", 120 pounds, with long black hair and green eyes. She was last seen wearing black pants and curly hair extensions. She has tattoos on her arm. According to her family, Crystal and her boyfriend were arguing outside her home. Crystal's children heard her scream, but she never came back inside the home. If your loved one is missing, the first step is to contact the police to get it on record. You can immediately start your search, and then after 3 days, ask the police to place your family member on the FBI's National Crime Information Center list as an endangered adult. That helps push the information out nationwide. You can find more resources on blackandmissinginc.com/resources. Stay with us. My final word after this break. All right, family, we have reached the end of the show, but before I let y'all go, I want to just say one more word to you about these missing black folk around the globe. I know the news is often bad. I know the hope is often dwindling when we hear that people are missing. But there's something we can do about it. We're not completely hopeless. We're not completely helpless in this situation. The great Frederick Douglass said, "Power concedes nothing without a demand." We have to demand that the powerful do something to help us find our children. What does that mean? It means that we have to demand that media outlets cover missing black and brown children. Not just the black outlets like us. We're going to do our job and do it well. But you need to go to all those major networks that are talking about missing white women, that are talking about missing airplanes, that are talking about elections, and you demand that they cover us. They don't have any feelings, but they do have financial interest. And if they know that they'll lose an audience, if they don't cover our missing babies and our missing grown folk, they'll do something about it. Our politicians have to cover this differently as well. They have to respond to it with legislation that helps dump resources into the finding of our people. And when you are out there talking to law enforcement, you need to be demanding that there are special units designed just to find black folk. If you believe in police, then you should believe the police should be finding us. It's really that simple. Never give up hope. We can always, always, always achieve the victory if we keep fighting and fighting in the right places. Our children deserve that. All black people deserve that.